Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Hey there, distinguished radicals. Are you ready for another deep dive into a hopefully spirit-tickling and thought-provoking episode of the Life Unrestricted podcast? I hope you are. And before we start, please get ready to give a round of applause to Julie, because I think she just made much more people happy than she probably realizes. Here's why. You all know that I'm on this platform called Patreon, where folks can support creative projects. So by any one of you becoming a so-called Patreon of this show, you're not just acknowledging my work, but you're also acknowledging the need for this message to reach more people. And on top of that, you're acknowledging that just because podcasts are free doesn't mean they are free to produce. Honestly now, had I known how much time and money this would cost, I probably would have thrown in the towel right away, simply because I would have thought that I would never be able to keep this up. As some of you know, I've been on medical leave for a long time, and I only started this podcast because I knew that I had to start talking about these issues that bothered me, in order to combat my own shame, in order to heal, and also to help others feel heard, feel less invisible, feel less alone in their own struggles, and maybe help them heal. And while I've become pretty damn good at living minimalistically in terms of money, and I realized that I really don't need much to live, and I do just fine without buying new clothes all the time, or haircuts, and manis, and pedis, and holidays and parties, it wouldn't have been wise really for me to commit to something that would be so costly. So long story short, I put myself on patreon.com, as many podcasters do, and then you lovely radicals came in. The goal is, of course, to make this show fully listener funded, and you all know it, your support on patreon.com/lifeunrestricted really is vital to this show. And you also know how grateful I am for you acknowledging my work. It really makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing here. So now let's hear that thankful applause for Julie. She just made a pledge on my Patreon page, and I really want her to know that this sort of support means that she is actively supporting those of you who need to hear this message yet cannot afford to support the show financially. So Julie has just made a difference for all of you out there who need a little bit of a sane place where they can hear inspiring guests talk about really what we all need to hear in order to keep our footing in this inescapable onslaught of self-esteem eroding, comparison-based, self-doubt promoting, anxiety-inducing, competition-fueled, self-abandonment encouraging, and mercilessly objectifying diet culture we live in. And yes, I had to write those words down in case you were wondering. I'm not that verbally agile to just come up with all those on the spur of the moment. That would be wizard-like, wouldn't it? Anyway, that was my long-winded way of saying thank you to Julie, and thank you to all of my Patreons. You really do help change the world. If some of you are thinking about making a pledge, no strings attached, of course, I invite you to go to patreon.com/lifeunrestricted and see if you want to jump on board. And if you do, be sure that I will let the whole world know about your badass move, just as I do right now. Love to you, Julie. Thank you. So I want to share a quote with you that I read this week, and it really stirred up something in me, and I thought I need to share this with you. It said, don't keep on looking for happiness in the places you lost it. I'm going to repeat it. Don't keep on looking for happiness in the places you lost it. Sounds a bit like a cognitive dissonance at first, but it really hits the nail on the head if you ask me. Because it is just like with anything we do, when we believe that happiness is something to be found in the external world, through approval, through outside acceptance. We might, simple example here, think that we'd be happy if only we have that new gadget. So we go out and buy it and it works for about a day and then we feel the old emptiness creeping back in, right? Or we think that if only we were thinner or fitter or more toned, we'd be happier. So we go on that new restrictive way of eating, the lifestyle plan, or this new fitness challenge. And again, it works. We get the compliments, we feel seen, finally. And then the excitement slowly makes room for a mounting sense of dread. You know it, the feeling of, fuck, how am I going to keep this up? And I have to keep this up in order to not lose face. And then the initial high turns into the one thing that keeps us from actually discovering who we really are. Working on self-acceptance, living in alignment with our values, owning our shit, cherishing authenticity and freedom to pursue our real dreams. Instead of suddenly finding ourselves trapped in the hell of how do I keep this up? We end up spending so much time and energy on keeping something up that isn't really us to begin with, and we never learn how to be truly ourselves. Therefore, we're not really living. I think what then ends up happening is what I would call a near-life experience. So whatever outside thing it might be that we give the power away to, whatever it is that we let decide whether we get to be happy any given day, that's where happiness is lost every time. So let's stop for a second and think about pulling back the conditioning that covers our built-in sense of okayness. And I know it's not the easy way out, but it's the way that will bring us what we really needed all along, a sense of okayness that is really not depending on any outside rules. No more settling for happiness that is conditional. No more near-life experiences. We only get this one ride as far as I know, and we really shouldn't waste it any longer. So whatever makes your real you, your true, unique you, happy, go right ahead, do that. You'll be such an inspiring example for the women and girls or men in your life. And you'll feel so much less at risk of losing something that wasn't really you. So that's what I'm working on. Less conditions, more contentment that comes from the inside. And if that means that I get to lose some people, that's actually fine because they were not for me. I was clinging on to people for all of my life that were really not for me. And I was trying to make them happy because I thought outside happiness is the only happiness there is. No one told me that there was this built-in sense of okayness. So it doesn't really matter if you lose people if they were only there because you were conforming to something that wasn't you to begin with. We can only find our tribe when we ourselves become real. Then we can be found by those people who will stay without conditions. We can do it. We're in this together. Promise. So you ready for today's dose of badassery? In this week's episode, you'll hear me talk to Kelsey Miller from Brooklyn, New York. Kelsey graduated from Boston University with a bachelor in film and television. She began her career in the film production industry before transitioning to full-time writing. Soon after joining the staff of the online magazine Refinery 29, she created the Anti-Diet Project, one of the website's most popular franchises. She is currently a senior features writer of Refinery 29, and of course she's also the author of the wonderful memoir called Big Girl. Before we started recording, she and I talked about all sorts of things, like, for example, that her best friend was originally from Switzerland, and that she had actually visited Switzerland before, and that she never met a Swiss person who wasn't nice. And well, here's the thing. I had to tell her that this could only be half the truth. Since while most people seem nice in Switzerland, and we were surely raised to be polite on the outside, they are also often extremely reserved and rather superficial. So they often smile politely and then talk about others behind their backs, and that makes me want to scream. It's just the fact that Swiss people are very reluctant to strangers, and while they might be talking to strangers, they certainly never open up and show their real selves to people they don't know, which makes it really hard to make new friends if you're in a position like me and your old life kind of turned out to not work out and you're like 40 years old and trying to make new friends. Oh man, that's so hard. And let's not mention dating. Dating is hell in Switzerland. So when she asked me if I was in any body positive groups, I said that body positivity wasn't really something that I come across very often in real life, or not at all. And that just as many of you, I would love to have more people around me that are stepping out of this hamster wheel of body obsession and diet talk and living behind a mask. So Kelsey and I agreed that it really is a blessing that we have these wonderful online circles where we have the opportunity to meet like-minded people that we wouldn't otherwise have met. So at least online we get to share our thoughts and struggles, and that's quite something. And speaking of real people in real life, my first official question to her was, what kind of girl would I have met had we played in the proverbial sandbox together as kids?
Sandbox age, I was probably singing. I don't know how big musical theater is actually in Switzerland, but over here there's a certain subculture around musical theater that's very old and very strong. And I was just sort of born of that tribe. From the moment I could probably talk, I was singing very loudly. So I probably would have been singing something. And I would probably be somebody who would be trying to make friends, show off all the reasons that you should be friends with me. You know, a little bit of that people-pleasing
so
attitude.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Do you have any memories when you were really young, how it felt to have a body or be in a body?
Gosh, sometimes I look at pictures of myself when I was really little, and I think I look so confident and so, unself-conscious, and I'm so impressed with my toddler self, because I think from the time I was conscious of having a body, I was very aware that it was like a problem, that it was just a collection of problems. So sadly, I don't really have any conscious memories of really just sort of not being aware or not being sort of
not caring about it so much.
Not caring about it. Yeah.
Me either. As I grew up in a totally diety household and was put on diets at a ridiculously young age. And as you say in your book, the same thing happened to you as well. And for those who have not read your wonderful book, Big Girl, how was it to grow up in the household that you did?
I think I share a lot in the book about the struggles, because the book is really a memoir told specifically through the lens of my food issues and related issues. And that was a big part of my life. So I think the dynamic around food in my household was always very tense, specifically with me, and I'm sure with others, because these things don't just sort of spontaneously happen.
But the focus was on you, right? And on your body.
I was and I was the, oldest child, much older than my brother and sister. And I was a food sneaker as well. I would hide in the pantry and sneak food from there. My mother was also a chef and a caterer. And so there was always food supplies around. But, having snack foods or treat foods and stuff like that, that was all sort of hidden away. And I grew up with a very clear sense of good foods and bad foods, and the fact that if I ate them, that would make me, a better or worse person, essentially.
Totally. I get the same as well. And I sneaked a lot of food at other people's places because there was hardly any, sometimes not even food at all, because it was all so chaotic where I grew up. But I am painfully aware that wherever I went into the kitchen first and asked for something to eat.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, I did the same thing. And when I would babysit for people, I would eat their food. And God, we were talking earlier about my friend, and she would bring tons of chocolate from Switzerland. Oh, and she didn't have a problem with me eating it, but I would go into her room even when, she wasn't there and take chocolate. Even though that wasn't forbidden and it was totally allowed, I had to do it in a sneaky way. I didn't feel comfortable asking for the chocolate.
Yeah, exactly. That's how ingrained it already was. That's what's really upsetting. If you want to look back how early we were programmed to behave a certain way, to feel ashamed for certain behaviors or our looks, whatever it was so early.
It was so early. And that's why it's so hard to, undo that wiring in the brain,
Oh, yeah. I totally struggle with it. Or I realize now that it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
So would you describe your journey for us, your start into and out of diets?
Sure. I think I was trying to restrict or trying to, eat foods that would make me thinner or smaller from the moment that the moment I was aware of my body, I was trying to sort of fix the problem. And I understood that eating or not eating was the way to do that.
Your mother taught you that?
I don't recall her saying, the words, your body is a problem and you need to eat less to solve the problem. But yeah, I mean, sure. She said all sorts of things, the way that I think a lot of parents do. Of course, I think she wasn't trying to make me miserable. I think it was all well-intentioned. And I think some of it was just sort of the natural thing that a parent would do if they saw their child gaining weight. I started puberty very early when I was about 8 years old, and I started gaining weight rapidly at that time. And I'm sure that was probably alarming. And certainly she did make comments about food and my body, and she would sometimes it would just be like a look at the dinner table if I reached for something that she didn't think I should be reaching for. Or a comment if I wanted seconds of something, or if I expressed too much excitement over dessert or whatever it was. So I think, as with many people, there was some specific instruction about what to eat and what not to eat, and there was a lot more indirect instruction. And I always felt that my body and my eating were things that made her angry. And, when you're a kid, you just want your mom to love you and not be mad at you. And
totally.
Yeah, so that really played into my behavior with food. And I went on my first real formal diet when I was 11. And it was because, as I say, I was really into theater as a kid, and I got a chance to be signed to a talent manager, and I really wanted that. So the manager wanted me to lose 10 pounds and told me to come back in 2 weeks having lost that weight. And I took it even further than that, and I lost a lot more than that. And it, as I say in the book, it's because it was incredibly easy at that time because A, I was 11 years old, and B, the reward that I had, the carrot on the stick, was this sort of idea of child stardom, and it was all I ever wanted. And so I was in sort of a fog. I was in a state where all I really thought about was losing that weight as fast as I possibly could, and I didn't care about anything else in my life. I don't recall even feeling deprived of anything because it was my real first experience. And as so many people know, even like with drugs, that are sometimes the first experience is this euphoric, magical state, and you're constantly trying to get that back when it's over. And
that's actually a very good analogy because it really is. The first time is the easiest. You get all the compliments. And you can, if there's no one awakening you to what's going on, you might spend your life chasing that dragon, not realizing that by doing that, you're losing all of your self-esteem and you're getting obsessed and your life gets smaller. But you're really only after that high because, damn it was possible. It was once easy. And I sort of fucked the rest up, thinking that, you know, dieting is only the success part and the rest is you. When in fact it's all in one package, you know. Totally. The devil comes with it. So you lost all that weight. Yeah.
So I lost all that weight. I didn't end up getting signed to the manager for some other sort of vague reason. It just sort of fell apart. And, you know, the magic went out of it from that moment on. And I gained all the weight back. All the small clothes that we had bought when I lost the weight, you know, just sort of got shoved to the side of the closet.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just, as you point out, I was just constantly chasing that dragon. I was constantly trying to get back in that magical first experience for, you know, almost 20 years after that. So I tried all different kinds of diets from that point on because, you know, the logic is that, okay, so this one didn't work for me, then I'm going to find the next, the new one, the shinier one, the one I haven't tried, and that'll be the one that works. So I went through many, many different phases with that. And in between, it wasn't as if I was dieting sometimes and eating normally sometimes. I was either dieting, you know, extremely, or I was in sort of a in-between diet period, which was just like eating as much as possible and not exercising, whatever, and being as lazy as I could. Not even like enjoying it really. It was just sort of a desperation, because what happens when you repeat this cycle enough is your brain gets the message that like, okay, so that period of restriction is over and it's going to start again soon. So in the meantime, I have to just like store up all the food I can. And, you know, that's what sort of created this binge behavior in me. And at certain points, I tiptoed into, you know, sincerely disordered eating and other behaviors, dabbled in a little bulimic behavior, definitely became better at binging and more crafty about restricting.
Were you aware of the fact why you were binging? Or was it just because for me, it was just not understandable. I didn't connect the dots. I was just binging and then thinking, see, I knew I don't have any control over this, which led to me restricting again. But I didn't realize that it was just the same pendulum, like someone who had not, you know, breathed for a while and then came up gasping for air, that this whole restricting and then coming up for air and binging and then holding your breath again is connected. But I didn't realize it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think I did either in the way, like I didn't give myself any like understanding or slack, certainly. There was never a point when I thought, oh, maybe I'm doing this because I have just been restricting so severely. I did recognize, though, that binging and eating a lot was like the best way to get myself to commit to the new diet, because, as you say, I would just have this crushing guilt and panic over what I had done. And, you know, it was sort of like that last hurrah that people talk about before they go into Alcoholics Anonymous, like going on a bender and then going to an AA meeting. And I really felt that for sure. And it was effective. It always kickstarted the next diet because I felt like such a piece of shit after eating and being lazy and binging and sitting in that state for a while, you know.
Did you also dabble with over-exercise or exercise addiction?
Yeah.
Instead of being bulimic as in purging, I just purged through exercise, and that devil gets me all the time, again and again.
Yeah, I definitely did. That the exercise element, I think, is trickier and has perhaps even been trickier for me in relearning how to do it properly, more so than food even, perhaps, because I don't know, it's just a more complex thing, or it's a different animal. And sorry, I'm rambling, but to answer your question, yes, I definitely exercised in not so healthy or moderate ways. And I really had the belief that the more you exercise, the harder you went, the better. And that it actually didn't really count unless you hated every second of it.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Yeah.
You call that a rational exercise in your book.
I mean, what I call exercise, the way that I frame it now, I call it rational fitness, which I think it just means exercising not like a crazy person, essentially, which is how I did it before, and it wasn't consistent at all either. I would commit to the gym or to like hot yoga, for example, or whatever fitness fad I could sort of get my hands on and just go so hard. And sometimes I would injure myself, and that would perhaps kick off another binge period, because if I couldn't exercise, what's the point of dieting? So I would just have to sit on my couch for, a year, maybe, for example. So
I think exercise and food are equal challenges, really. And a lot of people get stuck in trying to loosen their food reins or legalizing food, but then cranking up their exercise. So the diet mentality is still not addressed, and the body acceptance is still not addressed. The body image work is still not addressed. They end up just, as I did, just, all right, I can binge, but I just exercise like a maniac. So that thinking, we might get stuck in that, because also it's something that is applauded. And only when your body starts breaking down, or you get chronic pain or chronic illnesses, only then you will realize that this does not go without any consequences. And I didn't realize that, because everybody says exercise is good, so of course more is better. And I had never thought that this would actually cost my body too much, and hormonal out of whack, and sleeping problems, and irritability and anxiety. I might have been a very anxious kid right from the start, but still my anxiety skyrocketed. My depression, my irritability, and nails and hair and skin and everything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people don't talk about the fact that exercise, when you do it too much, there is like a physical impact on, as you point out, you can get so easily dehydrated. You can, throw your stress hormones out of whack and actually end up creating more anxiety, as you point out. And forget about what's happening to your joints. People don't see those effects, but they're there. I mean, it's crazy.
I had dislocated disc in my back and had to have a major surgery 1.5 years ago. And only later we found out that it was because I had osteopenia already, because I lost my period for over-exercising. And that's only one thing, losing your period. And there's so many other things coming with over-exercising that it's very bad for the heart. The stress hormones, if you have cortisol levels that high, we think it's a de-stressor, and it might be mentally. For me, of course, it's also numbing out, or a way of escaping other problems in life. I totally admit that. But it is never a de-stressor for the body. And I didn't realize that. No one tells you that. No fitness magazine will ever tell you that.
Yeah, no, nobody. Yeah, it's true. It's a mess. That's a whole other thing. Yeah.
And as you said yourself, it took a lot of practice and professional help to undo some of the damage you had done to your body and brain when you were stuck in that diet mentality. Where the only thing we know that counts is becoming skinnier. And I appreciate the way you wrote so relatably about things that when we read about it, we immediately recognize as very painful. And we become aware that what we were actually doing ourselves, without noticing how much pain we are willing to inflict on ourselves. But when someone else tells you what they are doing, or writes it as you did, then we go, oh no, why did she hurt herself so bad? And then you take a minute in silence and think, oh, I've been doing that to myself all the time, and I've never realized it was painful, or not really self-loving at all.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that it resonated in that way, because I know, of course, what you're talking about. I mean, the way that when we listen to other people and what they go through, it's so much easier to have sympathy and to, if they need to be let off the hook, we want to let them off the hook. We want them to feel better. And we can't, or I don't know why we can't do that for ourselves just as easily.
So would you describe to us maybe that turning point and then what you did to, take the first steps out of this diet mentality mess?
Sure. Yeah, I had gotten to a point where I don't think I realized it at the time because, one part about dieting is that it gives you something to think about all the time. You don't have to really do any kind of self-exploration. You don't have to be mindful. You don't have to think about your own body. You just have to follow the rules.
Yeah, it's total addiction. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's easier in a lot of ways than actually listening to your body and your own brain. But I was 29 and I had finally, I'd started dating very late. I'd started sort of advancing my career very late, but I'd done it. And there I was in my first relationship, and my career was sort of exciting, and I couldn't deny it anymore. And I was on a trip for work, and I was running through the woods, and I just came to a point where I realized I couldn't physically keep going, and I couldn't keep going in the figurative sense anyway. I'd really run out of the ability to do this to myself. I couldn't let myself be loved by my partner. I couldn't be engaged in a loving relationship when I had such loathing for myself, and I couldn't, continue to treat myself like a piece of shit when I had this career that was really sort of exciting and taking off. It just my identity as a terrible person that needed to be fixed and needed to be thinner was in conflict with my life, which was going kind of well. And at the same time, I couldn't manage the sort of energy and time that dieting took up in my life and do all those things at the same time. It's very time consuming.
Oh, yes. And mentally also takes all the space.
Yeah, it fills in all the holes in your life for better and worse, because it allows you to sort of hit the snooze button on actually moving forward with your own life on all sorts of things, because you have to focus on your diet. But in that moment, it all just sort of came to a head, and I realized I'm done. I have to be done with this. And I stopped running. I sat down, and I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. This is over. This huge part of my life, this thing that has defined my life, is over. So what am I going to do now? And I had heard about intuitive eating before. I kept stumbling across it when I would look for books, new diet books online and things like that. But I hadn't really paid attention, because intuitive eating, for those who don't know, is the opposite of a diet. It's diet deprogramming. It's just a way of learning how to eat based on your, own sort of human natural instincts and your basic common sense, the way that we eat when we are very small children, for example. And, it doesn't make any promises about 30 pounds in 30 days. And it doesn't make any promise about transforming your body and being thin forever. And that's all I had been focused on up until that point. But when I was sitting there realizing that I was done with dieting, I knew that I would need help to not do it, because I didn't know any other way. And I had a sense that intuitive eating would probably be the way out. And so I immediately just got online and started looking for intuitive eating coaches, people who were, preferably certified nutrition professionals as well. And, they're everywhere. It's crazy. Once you look for this, it's everywhere. And it's not a new concept at all. It's been around basically as long as the concept of dieting has been around and as popular as it is. It's just that I think because nobody's really profiting that much off of teaching people just how to eat normally, it's not like a big giant industry, but it's a really, really, really life-saving thing. It's used a lot in eating disorder treatment as well.
And still not enough. They're still not weight neutral enough in eating disorder treatment. That's why the failure rate is so high, because they have to teach people how to feed themselves again, no matter what kind of eating disorder it is. But then they go, yeah, but don't eat too much and don't get too fat, which is the exact message you need to fall back into your eating disorder. I hope there will be more and more real intuitive eating for that sort of recovery. So
I truly hope so. I found a wonderful, wonderful intuitive eating coach who was also a certified dietitian, and she was a MS, and she had all these degrees, and she was very experienced. And, the thing that I was worried about was okay, this is going to be just some sort of fake hippy dippy thing. It sounds so like, it sounds kind of not real, intuitive eating. You know, it sounds like something you do at a yoga center. And I don't have judgment on that. That's something I've been to yoga retreats plenty, trust me. I can get into some hippy dippy shit. But I was really looking for somebody who was like no nonsense. And I found it. My wonderful, wonderful intuitive eating coach, Teresa Kinsella is her name. And she was just totally direct with me. It was like going to therapy, but just for food stuff, as she pointed out. It's like she would say things like, you know, it's like therapy, but I don't need to know about your sex life. You know what I mean? I just need to know about your food stuff. Let's keep it simple here. And I loved that. I really responded to the fact that she was so straightforward.
Even though everything is connected.
Everything is connected. Totally. Yeah. I know. Immediately when she said that, I was like, well, it is kind of connected. But I was like, but I'll deal with that with my regular therapist.
Right.
But it was amazing. And I started seeing her shortly thereafter and just working on the first step of intuitive eating. And, you know, it's not the kind of thing where it's like step 1, step 2. They're just sort of principles. But there is, you know, a sort of baseline that you have to establish before you can get deeper into it, which is reclaiming permission to eat. Like, you know, so few of us have true internalized permission to eat anything they want and whatever they want to and however much they feel like, you know?
Yeah, that's been beaten out of us.
Oh my God. It is so hard. Mm-hmm. And the only thing to do really is to just sort of hop in with blind faith and give yourself, or, you know, hopefully if you have some professional help as I did, let them give you permission to eat if you can't give it to yourself yet, and then just go for it. And for me, that took a little while of eating a lot of carbs, because I didn't realize at the time, but it's really obvious now that like carbs were probably at the time my most forbidden food.
And you know, so important.
Yeah, they're so important. And they are something that I had always, you know, been told to steer clear of. I say mostly since, you know, I was a teenager when like the Atkins diet came out, and that's when carbs first became demonized in my lifetime. And so that was sort of the big issue for me. And I found myself just like eating potatoes and pasta like crazy and starch. And I would talk to my intuitive eating coach and be like, I'm addicted to carbohydrates. I have a problem. I need to go to pizza rehab. This is a huge issue. And she was like, and at the same time, I was also keeping a food journal, which was basically a record just not about portion control, for example, but about what I was eating and how I was feeling about it at the time, and any sort of judgments that came up when I was eating whatever I was eating, any thoughts, like big, loud thoughts that occurred to me. And also things like my level of hunger before I ate and my level of fullness when I stopped eating. And she would point out, you know, you're not eating, like, you're not actually binging on carbohydrates. You're eating a little more. Carbohydrates are more present than they would be probably in what we would refer to as a balanced meal. You've also been, you know,
that's the pendulum.
Yeah, it's the pendulum. It has to swing, and it just sort of has to happen. There's really no way to avoid that. And she was like, so don't avoid it. Just like, you know, keep going, you know, you're okay, basically.
Did you trust her, or did you get angry when you started to gain weight? What happened?
I don't think I gained weight really in the beginning. So that's the thing. It's like I think a lot of it was sort of the panic happening in my mind, making this seem a lot more extreme than it was. I mean, it felt crazy and forbidden for me to eat any carbs, let alone a lot of them at the time. So I just had to roll with it. And it didn't take very long for things to even out. That's the really shocking thing. But I did have to sort of commit to it. And whenever that voice in my head came up saying, like, this is a terrible thing, this is a bad, big mistake, you're going to, you know, overdose on pizza and everybody will know, and this is just a giant mistake you're making, I would just have to be like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do it anyway. I can't trust myself, but I trust Teresa, and I'm just going to have to go for it. And it was just a matter of weeks later when I found myself just not feeling the way I was feeling. You know, when you really give yourself permission to eat something and you really have it and you eat it to the point of satisfaction and you get just as much as you need, as long as you need, exactly what you need, then your body stops treating it like forbidden fruit. Your body stops demanding it as if it's something that's going to go away. I mean, actually, I would say your brain It is a mental thing. It's like my brain had to get the message that I wasn't going to go back into diet mode and that this was not the end of carbohydrates. So it didn't, eventually was just like, okay, well then I'm not going to, demand them around the clock anymore. And that's just how it worked. And it just worked. And so from then on, I really committed and trusted Teresa and trusted, the book. There's a book, Intuitive Eating, and I would use that. I would sort of lean on that in those dark moments when I felt like I was a crazy person. I would just pick up the book and say, okay, this isn't a magic spell. This reads like total common sense. And I would go for it. And, it took time. I saw my intuitive eating coach every week for a year. And I went through ups and downs and difficulties. And it's still, as I say, something I practice and work on. And it's not totally instinctive to me yet, not all the time at least. When things are stressful, it's more difficult. But for the most part, I just sort of eat pretty normally. And that's sort of a miracle to me. I mean, at the same time, of course, it's not just about food. It's never just about the food.
I wanted to ask you, what came up or what was the hard part about this?
Oh my God, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, one of the hardest things was that I had been sort of spinning my wheels and engaging with this diet behavior, this disordered eating, this binging, in order not to engage with my life and other things and my feelings, certainly. And
do you realize now what you pushed away?
Oh my God. I mean, like, it's not just one thing, but there was a lot. There was a lot of terrible stuff that I had to sort of grapple with. Yeah. And some of it was not so terrible stuff. Some of it was stuff that just like people deal with as they're growing up, but I never did because I was very busy dieting. Like,
purpose.
I mean, there was, sure.
Death.
Yeah, everything, mortality. What do I actually want to be doing with my life? And a basic relationship skills that I hadn't developed because I was like, well, you can't date and you can't really, socialize because you're not thin enough yet.
Right.
So I had to really learn all that sort of stuff.
And you already had a boyfriend, right? So
I did. But
how did that change?
Oh my God. I mean, we went through the most difficult phase of the relationship when I was in the early stages of like intuitive eating.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I deal with anxiety, with clinical anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Yeah, and I hadn't been treating it really properly. And I hadn't even been evaluated on my medication for years and years and years. And I'd been managing it with this diet behavior and also things like, which were like sincerely like self-harm, which started as a kid under the guise of exercising, like when I would do exercises in my room at night. And those exercises eventually involved into me simply injuring myself. But of course, all of this I didn't acknowledge and I kept it so hidden and nobody saw any of it. And then when I stripped away all that diet bullshit and all that stuff that I'd been using to keep this at bay, everything just sort of came flooding to the surface. All my mental health stuff came flooding to the surface. All my, buried family stuff I hadn't dealt with came flooding to the surface. And it was really hard to confront all that at once.
So
and
you felt more anxious in the beginning.
Yeah, I felt terribly, terribly anxious to the point where I got for the first time into cognitive behavioral therapy, which was a godsend. I will tell you, when I was, I think, in the first year of doing this, I was in so much therapy. I mean, I've done therapy a lot in my life, but I was seeing my intuitive eating coach. I was in cognitive behavioral therapy. I was in psychodynamic therapy, which I'd been in before. And I finally started seeing somebody regarding medication, which I hadn't done in almost 10 years, which is really irresponsible of me. And I had to take care of myself in that way because I was a mess and all these things that I had to deal with, I needed help dealing with. So it was a really difficult time, but it was a miraculous time as well because it made me get the help that I needed and learn how to
tackle it. And you saw that you were worthy of getting therapy. I mean, I'm a total lover of therapy because I think it really helps. And I'm digging around in some very painful stuff as well. And I realize Yeah, this is a coping mechanism and an escapism and numbing out from feelings, and it doesn't have anything to do with the body, even though it really feels like it. But
It
it's
is.
not. And it's our choice whether we want to start living or not.
Oh God, yes, I know.
Yeah, so I'm
totally
really
exactly
happy.
what you're saying.
I'm really happy that she started all those therapies. It's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I also want to point out to anybody who thinks like, okay, this person's like crazy, or maybe I don't want to do this because I don't want to feel all the feelings all at once. Again, just like with the carbohydrate thing, it's the kind of thing where the pendulum has to swing. It had to swing. And I'm not in constant need of that much therapy all the time now. I do see a therapist, and I do practice a lot of the techniques that I learned in cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'm very much aware that this is not something that is over and done with and I'm all better forever. But I'm not in that state of extreme acute anxiety at all anymore. I'm so much more functional. I'm so much more grounded. And that is possible. That is achievable.
Wow. And how did you kind of manage to accept the love that your fiance brought to you and you were previously not able to accept, really?
Well, I mean, people always say that thing about how you can't love another until you love yourself. And what I learned in that phase is that, no, you actually can. It's just really uncomfortable for both of you.
Really?
So, yeah, it's terrible. Oh, my God. When somebody loves you and loves your body and you hate yourself and your body, it's just not sustainable. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
Lying in bed and cuddling somebody who wants to cuddle you and you're like, don't touch my stomach.
Yeah. Oh, my God, I know. But that doesn't change overnight. So how does one tackle this? I mean, this must be really hard.
I think you have to commit. That's a situation where you kind of have to push yourself out of the comfort zone. At least I did. And also, I want to point out that might require a little more help for some. I am somebody who dealt with sexual abuse as a child, and that was definitely folded into my intimacy issues and my feelings about my body and my feelings about having a partner, a romantic partner. So I'm not by any means saying like, just fake it till you make it. It's no problem. Just do it. I know it's really, really hard. The only thing that I could really do is just be as expressive as I could be with my boyfriend at the time, now my fiance, the man who's going to be my husband in just a matter of months. I had to learn to share these things with him and say these things that I didn't even want to say to myself. And yes. I mean, of course, I got very lucky in terms of the person that I wound up with, and he hung in there with me through some really difficult times. And, he probably will again. I'm not saying that this is never going to be an issue for me ever again. And I still have a hard time when he touches my stomach, but I try to
ease into it.
Yeah, I do. And when I am uncomfortable, when I'm feeling physically triggered or when I'm feeling physically uncomfortable, I make a point of saying that. And it's a dialogue between us. It's all about communication, really. That's what it is. It's the only way.
And it's a wonderful opportunity for him as well to see when you start being vulnerable and telling him how you feel and how stuff makes you feel, then he gets the opportunity as well to share with you. So I would think that the intimacy can only grow when you grow together.
Oh my God, absolutely. Absolutely. And the trust, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because I'm not big on trusting easily because of my story probably. So that's what I think about often when people talk about intuitive eating, the whole process, body image work, relationships. It ties into everything, doesn't it? Like, who do you trust? You don't even trust yourself, man. That's what I found out. Like, what are you don't trust the world. You don't trust yourself. I mean, that's dramatizing it, of course, because I've had enough therapy to be aware of what's going on. But I mean, a person who is stuck in the diet binge cycle or in an eating disorder or disordered eating is not really trusting themselves. Therefore, is not really trusting anyone else on an individual level. Mm-hmm. But we give all our power away to some diet culture bullshit, really. And we
Yeah.
think that they know better what we need, which
Oh,
is
yeah, because
absurd.
we're terrible pieces of shit with terrible
Right.
bodies and we don't know what we're doing. And we, of
Right.
course, you know,
And our mothers were right. I
oh
know.
God, everyone was right. The mean kids were right. The
Right.
people who actually love us must, and that's the other thing about the intimacy is that when you really believe all those nasty voices and you believe the bullies and you believe your mother and you don't believe in yourself, then when somebody comes along and like loves you and says that you're great, the
You get
immediately thought is
suspicious.
like, yeah, there's
Yeah.
clearly something wrong with this
Right.
person.
And then you start pushing them back because
Yeah.
clearly they're out of your mind to love
Yeah.
you because somehow they must not see all your flaws. Yeah, I get, that's the problem. You know, that the snake kind of eats its own tail all the time, it seems. What I want to know is the book has been out for over a year now. A year now, yeah. I've had it for a long time and I've read it twice now. So,
glad.
yeah. I wonder, you were a bit, unsure whether or not your family would appreciate or would acknowledge your work or how that was going to play out. And you said, which I really appreciated, that you were still in the process and that there's no there to reach, but that working on ourselves is something that we will do for the rest of our lives. So I wonder, how has this past year been for you?
Wow. How has this past year been for me? Busy. It's been very busy and exciting and new. And I mean, in a lot of ways, yeah, I keep going, there's no sort of like magical goal. And it's all about getting used to the idea that there are ups and downs and easy days and hard days and really, 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 really terrible days. But I will say that life has gotten bigger and easier simply by accepting that. Because, as I say, diet mentality is super black and white. There's just like good days and bad days. And if you have a good eating day, then it's a good day. And if you like go over your points or your calories or your carbs, then it's a bad day. And in real life, it's a lot more complicated than that. And it's all about your own perception. And I think that I'm still learning that in a lot of ways, trying not to sort of say like, oh, okay, well, I didn't finish that story today, so it's a bad day. And therefore I'm a bad person, I'm doing a bad job, blah, 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 spiraling. It's really about being present in my life. I think that has been the goal for me. That's been a pretty big goal for me.
Watching our thoughts, right? Watching our beliefs and questioning them.
Yeah.
For the longest time, we don't do it because it's just a program that we've been running on. And for me, it was Byron Katie and the work, School of the Work, that taught me to question my own thinking, which was revolutionary. And I could, in fact, logically and reasonably reframe all of my stuff. So I saw that it really is our filter that we perceive the world through. And really, depending on the filter you have on, you will only prove your own inner truth right. And you need someone to tell you that this truth is not really the truth. And that you can, put another filter on or try different filters, and you will see that the world will only prove these truths to you. It's just like if you buy a new car, a yellow, whatever, Cadillac, you see a lot of yellow Cadillacs out there.
Yeah.
Our mind is so extremely powerful, yet we don't really realize it because it's just there somehow. And we need someone to tell us that this machine cannot be left uncontrolled because it will run haywire. It will come up with the negativity bias and all our catastrophic thinking. And if you just let that run, oh my God, that's why things get worse,
Totally. It's funny you mentioned that. I've been thinking a lot about the ways that I try and manage my own filter or check my own thoughts. And one thing that I've been doing is really curating my social media feeds to sort of, that's a huge thing. It's particularly on Instagram, which is such a visual medium. I just want to fill that with as much diversity as I can so that the world doesn't look one way to me. I want to see all different kinds of people. I like to see, I want to see a range of bodies, and I want to see as much of that community we were talking about as I can. The people who really challenge diet culture and challenge standards of beauty and all that, all that bullshit. I try and make sure that I get that in my face as much as I can. And it does. It makes a difference.
It really does, because we were not even aware that what we see on the covers of magazines and in like 99.99% of all the Hollywood movies or on TV, that we subconsciously kind of think, yeah, that's the population. And we only see how much we differ from that. But in fact, there's no representation of the real population at all in mainstream media. And that's why I loved your idea with Refinery 29, where you write when you started that 67% project. And talk about that.
That was really cool. I don't think I even mentioned the fact, but I guess it sort of goes without saying that I worked with Refinery 29. I was on staff there for about 4.5 years. I still write for them. I'm a regular contributor. And last year, I worked on this project called the 67% Project, which essentially the 67% number comes from the fact that 67% of women in the U.S. are deemed plus size. I don't know what the sort of equivalent European size is actually, but in the States, it's a size 14 or higher. Yet those women make up less than 2% of the images we see in mainstream media. That's obviously a problem. And that representation, because, people say like, oh, who cares? It's just like models and it's just movies and it's just television and garbage.
Not true. It totally seeps into our subconscious all the time.
Think about the images. Like I'm in my own home and I'm just even looking at the walls in my own home. I'm seeing images that include bodies. And we're so used to it. We're conditioned. It's conditioning really from day one.
It's the filter we talked about, one of those filters.
Yeah, of course. Before you even understand language, you have the visual appearance of what things look like, and you're taught, as you point out, that subconscious level, what things and what people are, quote unquote, supposed to look like. So what we did at Refinery was first create our stock image file. We do our own stock imagery. And we wanted to make a whole new batch of stock images featuring women in this size range and then incorporate that into our homepage, the newsletter, and our visually driven social media platforms, matching the 67% percentage. For that, the first initial launch, the idea was we were going to commit to 67% of the images you saw in all those places would be of plus size women, with the sort of understanding that they would be incorporated more and more going forward, and that every photo shoot, this would be part of the casting. And also, one of the big things was that you do sometimes see plus size women in publications, but they're always within like a very specific context. They're always within the context of their bodies. So if you see a plus size woman, it's a story about being plus size, like plus size fashion or
plus size
dating
fitness.
While plus size, plus size fitness. Exactly. And we just put them in regular, normal stories, like a story about work and money, plus size woman in a career story, plus size woman in a beauty story, blah, 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 blah.
Love, anything, having coffee for Christ's sakes.
Because she is the norm. That woman with that body is the average, and she needs to be seen in a normalized context. That makes a huge difference. And that was just really exciting. And then the other thing we did was we created a licensing deal with Getty Images so that other outlets could purchase these images and use them themselves, because, one outlet making this change doesn't make a dent. This is something that needs to have a cumulative effect. It needs to be a ball that continues to roll. So that was really exciting. And immediately, the second we launched those images, people did start picking them up. I don't know if it exists over there. There's a dating app over here called Bumble, super popular. And Bumble, I think in the very first week, bought one of the images and began using it in their advertisements for just a dating app. And we were like, yes, this is amazing.
Because we need to maybe address, for people who don't know, how the reality of those stock photos, how it really looks like, or how it looked like before you launched this project, because it is really, really terrible.
Oh, God, yeah. You could, if you looked plus size woman or large woman, you would find, I'm not exaggerating when I say the only images you would find would be either ones that implied that she was sort of like depressed, like sitting on a beach, facing the ocean looking like she was about to kill herself, or standing on a scale.
Headless often, the headless fatty.
Very headless fatty.
Oh, terrible.
Always either in the context of like gaining weight or trying to lose weight or being miserable. And
or
there was
eating.
no or eating. There was no like neutral image whatsoever, let alone a positive image.
Yeah.
So it
so
was like
dehumanizing.
So dehumanizing. And it makes a huge difference just seeing yourself in a normal everyday context. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I watched out for this in movies because, there are certain actors that I just love, like Melissa McCarthy. I'm totally fangirling for this woman. It's incredible. I think I love her dimples. I love her acting. She's wee. But still, in so many movies, when I see bigger people, yesterday I saw, what was it? Damn it. There was one operator that worked for a spy, a man. I don't remember what the movie's name was. And I thought, wow, there's a bigger guy normally depicted, but no, it wasn't, because every other scene he was, portrayed eating burgers, eating candy, always eating and having crumbs on his face. And so that, the viewer gets this slightly disgusted feeling like, ugh. And I was so enraged about this, and I started to just watch out for stuff like that. And I realized that in almost all the movies that people in bigger bodies are depicted as, all right, the lazy ones. All the cliches are being served. It's terrible. It's like, all right, guys, come on. Can't you be a little more original with this? Why can't this woman just be happy? You don't need to film her eating cheeseburgers throughout the rest of the movie. It's terrible. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is terrible. It is. And it's so normalized that the fat tropes in media, it's a huge project, I think, to overhaul that, but it's one worth taking,
Yeah, it is. It is. And did it take off? I mean, do you still do that with the 67%?
Yeah. We were talking about it even yesterday, because the whole commitment with this was, this is going to keep going. This has to keep going. This can't be a one-time, one-week project. And I think it's been really challenging. It was challenging enough just to create the 100 or so images for the first stock image batch, because plus size models in this size range aren't represented. Plus size models are what are not size 14 or higher. So the photo department had to run around casting people off the street. So basically, yes, it continues, but the challenges continues. It did not get any easier after this happened. I mean, I shouldn't say it can get any easier, but it's still surprisingly hard just to keep this woman's image on one website on a daily basis. So many logistical challenges that go into it, and it just shouldn't be the case. But yeah, I mean, there's no choice but to just keep on going and try and figure out how to do it. And,
Why do you think there is such resistance? I mean, it's half rhetorical, the question, because we know about diet culture and everything. But yeah, maybe as a preface, maybe the first question would be, how should we explain diet culture to, let's say, a 12-year-old?
God, I wish I had a good answer to that question. How do we explain it? I mean, I think it's important with younger people to find the line between letting them know that there's this big, bad, terrible scourge on society out there that's ruining a lot of people's lives, and also not let them feel like there's no hope. You know what I mean? I think it's all about on the individual level. Right? Yeah, creating awareness, and also just leading by example. The way that you talk about yourself in front of young people and the way that you talk about other people in front of them sets an example. Sometimes people ask me, I have a friend who is really struggling with body image, and she's always saying I'm so fat, or I gained weight, and I want to talk to her about it, but I don't know how to do that without resorting to the old useless phrase, which is no, you're not fat, or you look great. And I just say, I think it's important to comment on the way a person is feeling and not their body.
Yeah.
that's just one simple step that's really hard. And I fall into that trap myself too. It's really hard to remember not to comment on people's appearances, but to just speak about bodies in a neutral way or not comment on them at all, whether it's a criticism or a compliment, I think goes a long way, and that's something that we can model for younger people for sure.
But I think it gets easier when we know how diet culture works. And I mean, when people started educating me about how this whole industry is making billions off of us feeling inadequate, and what we have bought into and whether or not this is really true and based on what and all the faulty science and all the ways that we spend our mental energy on that and how it's being reinforced all the time, that kind of awoke the rebel in me and made me much more aware of what in the greater context of this was happening. Like, it all influences so many other things. Like, how do women behave around themselves without diet culture being there? There's no physical presence of anything, but how this has been drilled into our subconscious so much that we are able to spend an evening or coffee with our girlfriends talking about food and our bodies, really, when we could change the world. So once you see that, once somebody awakes you to that, you can get sleepy again, but you will never fall back.
That's
and you'll
true.
never fall asleep again.
That's absolutely true. You're right. And also, I point out there is now, and maybe back when we were kids too, I'm not sure, but we didn't have, Instagram back then, but now we do. And we can point to people who exist outside of diet culture and who represent the opposite of diet culture. We have those role models do exist, and those voices can be found. You just have to look for them. Yeah. So I think it's important to point to them and to create and elevate those role models as well. So we have those people to say, like, okay, here's somebody who's doing it differently. You see a Weight Watchers commercial, then immediately show them a Virgie Tovar lecture or something like that, or Jess Baker's book, or Tess Holliday's, latest fashion spread. Point to the opposite, just so young people recognize that the world is full of all different kinds of people. And just because this sounds like the biggest, loudest voice in the bunch, it doesn't mean it's the only one.
No. And it's really, really mean how some of the, the weight loss companies have, and the whole industry really can be food, it can be a weight loss company, anything that has co-opted the term body positivity for something that has nothing at all to do with body positivity.
Oh God, that's the worst. Yeah, it's absolutely the worst. It's terrible. I'll be interested to see what happens, with that, because it's on trend right now. And that's a double-edged sword, because that means it can become not a trend. There can be a backlash later. And I just hope that if and when that happens, that the core of the movement holds.
Yeah. But let's say a friend of yours, a really close friend of yours, would tell you, hey, I saw Oprah on Weight Watchers commercials, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to do that. They're all body positive now, so I'm going to do it. What would you say?
Oh, my God. Well, I'd probably, if I'm being honest, my initial reaction would be like, no, they're not. I would just scream. But I would hope if I were in my right mind, I would take a deep breath and maybe ask them what they mean by body positive. Like, what does that mean to them?
And to them, it will probably mean, I want to get healthy and I've gained too much weight and you know how it is. And I see they are really successful. Let's say she says that. People usually say they want to be healthier or they want to be skinnier.
Well, I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, I don't want to tell anybody that they shouldn't, or they're doing the wrong thing or the bad thing, but just know, just remember, this is a company that is, their entire business model is based on you losing weight and you paying them to give this arbitrary point system. And also, I want to point out the fact that there is like a massive failure rate when it comes, quote unquote, failure. When I say failure, I mean long-term weight loss. Like any deliberate attempt at long-term weight loss, we know statistically is going to fail.
And this is actually a success, because the rest who doesn't fail, they will be stuck in dieting mode for the rest of their lives and or develop an eating disorder, which is actually worse than if you can't do it. Then that's actually your body saying, hey, no, we're not going to go down that road. And for those who are, quote, successful, well, that's the road to hell too.
Yeah, because if you lose weight on a diet, I mean, if you're in that like fraction, that tiny, tiny percentage of people who do keep weight off by dieting, you're going to be doing it forever. You're never going to get to that point where you're just like free and you can eat whatever and be normal and not pay Weight Watchers $20 a month or whatever. You're always going to have to do that. You're never going to trust yourself.
That's what happened to me, right? Yeah. I was a success and I thought, okay, that's the price I'm going to have to pay for the rest of my life, because I cannot lose that. And I wasn't aware, I didn't want to give up that social currency that I had gained from losing weight. And that meant me spending decades without even being aware of how small my life had become. So one wonders which is worse, experiencing the so-called failure, which might be a success, or experiencing decades of, I don't know, maybe probably it's both hard. Of them are terrible, because the person who quote unquote fails will start again. That's the problem. So it's hell for them as well.
Well, that I think is an important part, because it's true. If a friend comes to you and like is all excited about their new diet, I mean, you and I both know that like when you're pumped about a new diet and you really believe it's going to be the one that's going to quote unquote save you, nobody's going to talk you out of that.
No.
You kind of have to just go through the shitty cycle yourself. And, odds are statistically that friend who's starting a new diet will within a year be not on that diet anymore and will be the exact same weight or more than she or he is right then.
And feel shitty about themselves for failing.
Yes. And if and when that happens and they bring that up to you again and they talk about it and they feel miserable and, maybe they won't, because they'll feel ashamed. But if they do, and if you have that opportunity to speak to them in that moment, then make sure what you say to them then is really meaningful. That's the window when you can really let somebody know that you understand exactly where they're coming from and that there is another way to approach this. And so that, they don't have to feel this way, that they really, really, really don't.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity to get in all those facts about, this isn't really your failure. This is a system that is designed to make you fail.
Right.
And let them know that you're there for them. And no matter what, whether or not they decide to go back on a diet or not do it, that you love them just as much, that sort of reparenting that we all kind of need, because we all grow up with parents telling us that at a certain level, our lovability was based on our physical appearance, and letting somebody know that even as an adult, that it's really, really explicitly not about their appearance and you love them just as much. That's a powerful thing.
Yeah. It also ties back to my initial attempt at asking you, when we started talking about diet culture, my initial question was why there is so much pushback. And it also relates to conversations like that, like the ones you just described, when people just don't want to hear you say that. They just are so stuck. That's why I wanted to talk about diet culture first, because if that knot is not loosened, then you cannot really get through to them. And it's amazing how much pushback Health at Every Size, for example, gets, or how much pushback someone gets who talks about feminism or thin privilege, stuff like that. People just go on total block mode,
Well, we all are suffering from unconscious bias, and that is a very sticky situation, and we all have to confront unconscious biases within ourselves. And as you point out, I mean, people aren't ready to listen and ready to do that sort of uncomfortable work within themselves. They're not going to do it, and they're going to react with defensiveness. I mean, it doesn't mean it's not worth a try. I think it's worth giving it your all and trying to get through to somebody and trying to engage in a meaningful conversation, recognizing that, they just might not be ready to hear you. But, the same thing when I said I had heard about intuitive eating so many times before, but I had just sort of brushed it aside. It was still there in my mind. And when I hit that point, when I bottomed out, when I hit bottom with dieting and disordered eating and hating myself, that came flooding back from the back of my head. It was just waiting for me to be ready,
Oh,
So don't think
nice.
that it's not wasted.
No, it's probably never wasted. How did your family react and your immediate surroundings, your friends and everybody after your book had come out? Those people you were maybe worried about that they wouldn't like it?
Well, it was a mixed bag. I mean, putting out a book is incredibly exciting and such a privilege. And oh my God, I just still can't believe that I got to do it. This is one of those things you don't realize until you actually do it. It's really hard when you are dragging other people into the spotlight sort of inevitably, because they are part of your story and you can't tell your story without sort of, mentioning them at the very least. So that was an uncomfortable part for me. And when it came to my friends, they were all really, really, really supportive, and there wasn't anything but wonderful response. And really, they were so generous with me. I'm really lucky in that regard. And, with family, it's complicated, right?
Same as before.
Yeah, still complicated.
Yeah.
I think some folks were universally supportive, which I think is really incredible. I don't know if I would have been universally supportive if somebody in my family had written a memoir, especially if it mentioned me. But I'm being super vague because I don't want to sort of drag my family any more into the spotlight than I already have.
Right.
But I will say that, I think everybody really did the best that they could to support me and to recognize what I'd done in a positive way.
Yeah. Why I asked is because there are so many people in my Facebook group, Life Unrestricted, that are recently they have been, telling me that they want to write stuff about intuitive eating or health at every size of their journeys, but that they were, their inner gremlin told them that they can't do it and they have nothing to say and they can't write and don't dare, and what are the other people going to say? And I was kind of hoping that you would be able to say that it's worth it anyway, because you are finding your own voice. And
oh my God.
It will never destroy a relationship that was previously stable and authentic.
Yes, that is 100% true. That is absolutely true. It is always worth it. It is always worth it. I mean, I really struggled with who to keep in and who to cut out and what stories I should change and blah, blah, blah. And I had a friend say to me at one point, telling the truth is always the right decision.
Yeah, it is.
It is. And it doesn't mean that the truth doesn't come without consequences. It does. And it's going to be difficult, and you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. And guess what? You're going to have some uncomfortable conversations with yourself, because going through this and writing about this, writing a memoir, means diving right back into the stuff that we all have left behind.
Yeah.
And that's involve a lot of uncomfortable memories and experiences and feelings, and you're going to have to wade through all that again. And it's not going to be super fun, but it is absolutely worth it.
I think the path to liberation is never easy. And the upside, I would say, is that you might disgruntle someone, but you might also find your tribe, or they can find you because you put yourself out there. And, for me, a lot of people that have known me here for my radio days, blah, 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 they disappeared when I came out with my blog and my podcast. But I found people from all over the world. I find that when we are helping ourselves, we're also helping others. And that only works with authenticity. And every, dark phase and every wading through the dirt with your therapist, or every tear you cry, is in the end worth it so much more than just looking the other way and being around people that you don't really know if they would accept you if you showed your true self?
It's all to the greater good. It really is.
So you're working on another book?
Yeah, I'm working on another book. I'm working maybe on a few books. We'll see.
What? I want all the copies, and I want to talk to you about them as soon as I've read them.
I'll keep you posted. I will, for sure.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. So if people want to find out more about what you do and read your articles, where can they find you? So
you can find my regular column on Refinery 29, which chronicles everything about my journey with intuitive eating and rational fitness and body positivity going back to 2013 on refinery29.com. It's called The Anti-Diet Project. And you can find my book and all the different links to that on kelseymiller.com. You can find me on Facebook. I have a page. If you just look up my name on there, I'll be there. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ms. Kelsey Miller, which is MS Kelsey Miller. And I love hearing from people. I mean, I do. Feel free to reach out if you ever feel like it on any of those platforms.
Fantastic. And then we'll find out about your new book as soon as there are news, I suppose.
I will keep you posted.
Yeah. My final question to you is, what would you like to be remembered for, Miss Kelsey Miller?
Oh my gosh. Big question. What would I like to be remembered for? Doing my best. Geez, I can't think of a particular thing because I feel as though so much of my life is still evolving and my career is still evolving. And so I don't feel, Big Girl is right now an amazing accomplishment for me, but I don't feel like it is the biggest or by any means the only one that will define me. I hope. Yeah.
I have a suggestion.
Please.
You will probably also, among other great stuff, be remembered for having inspired other people.
Oh, that's a good one. I'll take that.
Good deal. Thank you for this talk. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Merritt. Thank you. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome. Make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.